The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Yes, I know the NFL draft wrapped up before 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. Maybe old news, but there's a lot of reaction to go through, and I'm going to have my reaction to the reaction. And it does feel like it's a new day in Ashburn. It really does. Look, 9 picks. 8 of them could be busts. We don't know. That's the thing about the draft, and we're not going to know for a few years. And Jayden Daniels, for all the hype and the fact that he went number 2 overall, it's all wonderful now. But if 3 years from now we're looking back and we're saying, man, that was not the guy to take. Drake May was on the board, and they should have taken him. Yeah, I mean, all that's in play. But it's the dance that we do every spring, and right now it seems to be pretty much a happy dance, right? They didn't get a tackle, okay, and maybe that's a concern. Charles Leno kind of fell into their laps a few years ago this way as teams bring in the draft picks and figure out their salary cap and so forth. There's going to be some cap casualties, and maybe there's going to be somebody who could fill in for a couple of years until they up that position. Look, this is not going to be a Super Bowl run this year. I mean, it could be. That's the thing about the NFL. You never know, and everybody will refer to what happened last year with the Houston Texans, where they get C.J. Stroud, number 2. He was clearly the right pick, and they go from the second worst team in the NFL to a playoff team that wins a playoff game. That's in play. But it's, if it's an 8-win season, well, that's a big improvement from last year. That's twice as many wins. Right now, Vegas has them at 6.5. It's not like they looked at what they did in free agency in the draft, though they got high marks on both. But it doesn't mean that there's necessarily going to be success. But it's fun to speculate, and it's, you might as well feel good this time of year, right? You might as well say, well, they did good work over the weekend. And for whatever this is worth, because the word culture gets thrown around, Ron Rivera took a bow for the culture change that he made in Ashburn the 4 years he was there. Whether he did or he didn't remains up for debate. But they have totally washed out his roster. 22 free agents, 9 draft picks, and 11 undrafted free agents. I mean, the roster is going to turn over maybe 50% from last year. There's going to be, obviously, a new starting quarterback. There's a running back, Austin Eckler, who's added to the backfield, changes that they've made on defense. When Adam Peters was introduced as the general manager and they asked him about the roster, there was a pause wide enough to drive 3 semi-trailer tractors through it. He was searching for the right word to describe what the roster was, and outside of a few positions, there wasn't much there. And on top of everything else, they had 2 highly paid, highly successful defensive tackles, yet it didn't stop them with taking a defensive tackle with the 3rd round pick. And it made sense because they need to layer in talent at those positions. Good teams do that. You can't have too much of good talent no matter what position it's in. You figure it out later. If you want to trade somebody away, you can do it. But if you come up short on talent, there's not much you can do about that. So we'll get much more into the draft. And Bill Belichick, I don't think this is a shock, but getting away from the podium in New England where he just grumbled, he's now very engaging, very funny. He's working in well with Pat McAfee and his crew. He's reached an agreement where he's going to be on with them every Monday. A lot has changed for Bill Belichick. Whether he coaches again or not, we don't know. But I think it's probably a strategic move on his part, not just to get into broadcasting, because broadcasting helps you to get back into coaching, but he's doing it with a young group so that when owners next year look to make changes, they're going to be looking at a guy who's going to be turning 73 years old, but they also may say, well, look at how he mixed in with this 30-something punter and his band of merrymen there. I mean, it's like 20 guys on the set with McAfee. But it's working, and he fit in very nicely with them, seems to be happy doing it. And we'll hear his Randy Moss story later this hour. Meantime, for the Capitals, I guess you could say this was inevitable.
The puck cleared away to center. The Capitals have it, but they are out of time. The puck left side for LaPierre. It is dumped in on Shesterkin. He will play it to his left, and the New York Rangers have swept the Washington Capitals in his best of 7. First round matchup, final score here in Game 4. The Rangers 4 and the Capitals 2.
Well, thank you, Capitals Radio Network, and that's that for a season, which, look, I mean, most of the way it looked like they weren't going to be a playoff team. With a couple of weeks to go, it didn't look like they were going to be a playoff team. But they got in, and they got in essentially as the 16th seed, playing the number 1 seed. This was the NCAA tournament, 16 versus 1, the best team in the league, the New York Rangers. And they went into it with the thought of, well, we're not an offensive team. We're going to have to win games like 3-2. Well, in 3 of the 4 games, they gave up 4 goals, and in the other, they gave up 3. And they only scored 7 goals in the series. Alex Ovechkin had only 5 shots on goal and no goals whatsoever. And on top of everything else, they were terrible on the penalties. They were bad with guys in the box and bad killing penalties. This is defenseman John Carlson.
I had a lot of good looks. I think if there's, one thing that probably carries the most, I think we were a little too one and done. We would get a chance or get a little pressure, a pop play, whatever it is, and then they get an icing. So, today, not so much that. We had a difficult time getting the puck in the zone with possession, but it always changes.
I know you got to be frustrated the season's over, but just looking at where you guys were a couple months ago, you guys kind of see some kind of silver lining in the fact that you guys were able to get in the playoffs and have this experience?
No, not right now, no.
It kind of reminds me of this, and I know, there he goes again with an old Redskins story. But when the Redskins, after they won the Super Bowl, 92, and that was Joe Gibbs last year in the first go-round, had a lot of injuries that year, including on the offensive line, and Mark Rippon didn't look like the Mark Rippon that won the Super Bowl MVP. They went, I think, 3 games without scoring a touchdown. They really struggled, and they had to back into the playoffs. They got in on the last day of the year. They finished the season on a Saturday with a loss to the Raiders, and they had to wait until the outcome of, I believe it was Detroit and Green Bay, to get into the playoffs on Sunday, which went in their favor. I believe it was Detroit that won. And then they got into the playoffs, and they had to play a playoff game on the road at Minnesota. Sean Salisbury quarterbacking the Vikings. They won that game. Then they go to San Francisco, and they were big underdogs in that game and had a chance to win it. There was a play there, which we talk about to this day, where Rippon has a handoff to Brian Mitchell, and it gets botched. 49ers recover, and that helped them to salt the game away. Anyway, after a year, which, they cruised to the Super Bowl, Rippon's the MVP, and then the struggles of 92 just to get there. I think they were 9-7 and kind of backing in, beat a bad Minnesota team on the road, and then go down to the 49ers, who wound up losing the following week in the NFC Championship game. They asked Mark Rippon, well, are you glad it's over? And he got angry, and he should have. No, I'm not glad it's over. We play to win the Super Bowl every year. And, yes, it was a team that didn't look like a Super Bowl team during the season, but once you get in, you never know what's going to happen. So that kind of reminded me of that, where Carlson, who's been on a Stanley Cup champion team, a team that did not win the President's Trophy, did not have the best record in the league, but found a way, got past their nemesis, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then went on to win the Stanley Cup. He's not that far removed from it, so that he's asked about a season where they may have overachieved down the stretch just to make the playoffs. He's not going to, have the satisfaction of saying, "Oh yeah, well, la-di-da, we were good enough to get in, but yeah, we were swept, but it's okay." He's not going to take that attitude. The Ovechkin story. Now, this, I think, is going to be a big, big story over the next 2 years. At the middle of the year, it looked like, oh, my God, how much longer are they going to have to drag this guy? Could it be 4 years before he breaks Wayne Gretzky's record? He got hot at the end of the year. He finished up with 31 goals. That leaves him 42 goals short of Wayne Gretzky's record. 2 years ago, he did have 42 goals. I don't think it's likely at his stage of the game that he's going to get that next year. So you're looking at 2 more years of Ovechkin. Meantime, you want to have a team that's going to be competitive, that's building towards the Stanley Cup. And how do you balance that? How do you do that? And Spencer Carberry, I think, did a very good job in his first year as coach here. But he's got an interesting balance here. He's got to build with young players, and yet he's got 2 full years. Looks like it's going to be 2 full years of Alex Ovechkin at whatever level he's going to be. I mean, there's no way he's going to break the record with another team. He's going to be in a uniform here for at least 2 more years, and how much production are they going to get out of him? I don't know. I mean, he's been counted out before. Remember, before they won the Stanley Cup, which goes back to 2018, before that season, it was like, okay, they've gone as far as they can with Ovechkin. Maybe they should trade him. And clearly that was not the right move. They didn't do that, and they won the Cup. Now it's 6 years later. And what are you going to do with an aging player who continues to be the most recognizable player on the team, most recognizable athlete in town for that matter, and one of the most in the NHL, and the focus, of course, on the Gretzky record? How do you handle all that? Well, one of the ways is you make sure that you got his back. And this was Spencer Carberry last night after watching the 4 games where Ovechkin had only 5 shots on goal and no goals.
They checked him so tightly over there that now all of a sudden, every time he gets a puck, he's got a half second to make a play, and there's usually a stick or some shin pads on it. So I think that played a major role in his individual play through the series, power play for sure. Matchup was tough in their building. And I think, too, I mean, he could speak to this, but I think that this year and leaning on him down the stretch, the second half of the year, he did an incredible job of finding his game, and also not just his game, but we were so scoring challenged all season long. Okay, so the second half of the year, we even become more scoring. We lose Anthony Mantha, Kuzi is out, so there's, and then you've got Osh out for a while. So you've got all these different factors, right, that make it even more of a challenge for you to produce offensively. So he comes in post-February where we had just, I want to say we lost 5 in a row, right? And that Midwest trip was right. The Dallas was the last game, and we come back, we lose to Montreal. And so our season is hanging in the balance. Like, we've lost 6 in a row. We got smoked in Colorado. Come back home and say, okay, fresh start. We lose to Montreal right out of the gate. Point I'm getting at is, if he doesn't go on that scoring run that, you guys will know the numbers on what it was, we're not even sitting up here, right? Like, he was scoring consistently every single night. So what I'm getting at is that was a lot. Like, the second half of the year and especially the last, call it 2 weeks, where every game was felt like life or death for our team. And he could answer that more accurately, but I feel like that took a lot out of him physically and mentally going into the playoffs.
We'll get to what Ovechkin said on some of the things that Carberry referenced there, but you hear that. That's 2 minutes and 20 seconds of, hey, we're not here without this guy. We still need this guy. I mean, this is what you're going to hear for the next couple of years. And make sure that you keep Ovechkin happy, because you're going to have a real problem if he's seen as a weight, as a drag on a developing team. And the record is important. I'm not discounting that, but it makes for an interesting balance that the coach has to deal with here, where he's got an up-and-coming group of guys, and you got to move on from the days of that Stanley Cup team, which, it was a team that was held together longer than some thought, that there were aging guys on there at that time, and that was 2018. It's 2024. Here's Ovechkin on how it all went so bad for him in the playoffs. Only 5 shots on goal, no goals.
Yeah, it's always tough to lose a series, especially we have pretty good chances. We just didn't score. Our line didn't score lots of goals, and playing on me, so I didn't play well. So it's kind of sucks that we ended up like that.
Alex, are you healthy, or is there something bothering you in this series?
No, I'm healthy.
What do you think it was? They just couldn't get on track?
Yeah, tried to find a way, but I don't think we stuck in the zone, in offensive zone a lot. And if we are over there, it's kind of like they just throw it back in neutral zone, and we have to go back and forth. And yeah, it's kind of was a frustrating game, but it's a playoffs. We all understand the urgency. Have to be a little bit higher, and but how I said, we was battling last 2.5 months for that spot. Proud of this group of guys. We've been through lots of injuries, trade deadline, but we stick together, and it's show the character in this group, and that experience what the boys have this year. It's going to help.
So he feels like, unlike Carlson, that there's something to be gained from this. He takes the blame for as poorly as he played. And that question that was asked, the first question there, I think is key, because you'd often find out something like this after a playoff series ended for the Capitals in disappointment. Usually they've been on the other end as the favorite and they go down. This time they were big underdogs and went out kind of meekly. But when he was asked, are you healthy? And he said, yeah, he's fine. Because there have been years where we find out he's been playing with a knee injury or a back injury or a shoulder problem. And apparently that was not the case this year. But it's over. So, Capitals, we will see you in September. Meantime, more draft analysis. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today. I don't know how much draft analysis he'll do, but I'm sure he'll have plenty to say on what the Atlanta Falcons did. He's still... I think he's still a fan of Washington football. A fan, the only fandom he really seems to have is the Nationals. But having observed him and lived in Washington all these years, I think he's going to have thoughts on it. And look, again, we don't know how good this haul is going to be. The draft grades are very good. Most of them are A. There's a couple of Bs in there. They wound up with 9 players. I think more players than less players is usually good in a draft. I love it when they load up in the second day of the draft, which they did. They had 5 picks. And don't overlook this either. This could turn out to be significant because they have 4 quarterbacks on the roster with Jayden Daniels. They added a 5th yesterday, an undrafted free agent who you're probably familiar with. His name is Sam Hartman. Played 4 years at Wake Forest, transferred to Notre Dame this past year, and he was expected to go in the late rounds of the draft. Nobody took him, so they brought him in. And I think what's more significant than bringing him in is the amount of money that they gave him, a guarantee of $245,000. And you say, well, why would they do that? They've got a veteran quarterback in Marcus Mariota. They got an extra arm in Jake Fromm, and they signed another guy who's bounced around. He played at Florida, and and then you the hope is that the Jayden Daniels becomes your star. What's the point of this? Well, this is long-term thinking, which they haven't really done in the past. They don't usually, during the Snyder years, it was instinctive. Whatever's happening now is what's important. Could be that they're looking at next year, not this 2024 season, but 2025, and maybe they could be ready to move on from Marcus Mariota, where you don't have to pay a hefty backup salary. And you got a guy like Hartman, who's got a lot of college experience, 5 years, playing at Notre Dame, spotlight, the whole thing. Maybe he's ready to step in and be your backup quarterback, and then you're not spending much money at all in that position because Daniels will be going into year 2 of a rookie deal. So there's a lot of forward thinking on that, and whether it's going to work out that way, who knows? But, there's a lot of guys who didn't come into the NFL through the draft and got in as undrafted free agents and have done very well in the league. Whether he's going to become a star or not, we don't know, but if he can become a serviceable backup, that makes a lot of fiscal sense on what they did yesterday. As for the overall, with the 9 draft picks that they took, and if you look at all of them, most of them were team captains. All of them spent at least 4 years in college. Not as big a deal as it used to be with the NIL, but you're getting some mature people, and and the word culture maybe gets thrown around too much, but this is a feel of the organization that they're bringing in some really solid people. And when everything wrapped up on Saturday evening, Adam Peters was gone, Dan Quinn was gone, but Lance Newmark, who's the assistant general manager, was left to answer the follow-up questions on the draft and said this about the overall haul.
I feel like we added our kind of football players, if that makes sense. Wherever we drafted, Coach Quinn has a saying that this isn't for everybody. And we drafted the kind of people that fit to what we do here and that believe in what we believe in, and just added a lot of those kind of character people to our building and to our organization. So I think that's where we improved the most, is we added a lot of people that believe in what we believe in and have the same goal that we have in the end.
Adam mentioned yesterday getting a commander tag. Is that like something that's on the draft board? And if so, what does that entail?
Yeah, it's something that we designate players with that kind of alluded to what I just said. They have the same kind of core beliefs and just the mentality that we believe in here. So we assign that when it's appropriate to people through the draft process, and it just gives us an indication that this is our kind of guy, and that's definitely part of the process for us is looking for those kind of people.
We are going to have to get used to the idea of accepting this, because went through too many years of Bruce Allen saying, oh, yeah, he's a real Redskin. He plays Redskin football. And Redskin football at the end was atrocious. So, you have to kind of look at this from a little bit of a different perspective. Also, Peters, this was revealed, I guess, over the course of the news conferences on the weekend. He has this thing that he does before the final day, before they get things going on Saturday at noon, and he has all the scouts and all the people involved in the draft process, as they say, stand on the table. Now, stand on the table brings a terrible connotation for me, because that was Kyle Shanahan standing on the table for John Beck in Houston. We all know how the John Beck story worked out. But they have what they call Commanders Caucus, and each of the people involved gets to stand up for one guy. Now, whether they took the 3 guys that was the consensus going into that is Jordan McGee, the linebacker from Temple, who went in round 5. Also in round 5, Dominic Hampton, a safety from Washington, and an edge rusher, the final pick, Javonte Jean-Baptiste from Notre Dame, 6'5", 239, last pick by the Commanders. Whether these guys are, have the Commanders check tag or whatever they call it, who knows? But there was a process for this, and that's something that seemingly hadn't existed here for a long time. As Jay Gruden said, for some years the owner would hop off his yacht and make picks. That's no way to do business. No way to do business whatsoever. More react to this. Now, this is Field Yates, who I guess he's become a draft expert. As I talked to Mel Kiper about this on the air a couple of weeks ago. What are the qualifications? They're on there. You just say you're a draft expert. So over the course of time, now Fields does have a background. He worked he worked for the Patriots. He's been at ESPN for a long time. He studies this stuff year round. And so he has some credibility. But this was Yates on ESPN with Zubin Mehenti as day 2 of the draft wrapped up.
Who won day 2 of the draft in your estimation?
Yeah, I'll go with the Washington Commanders. A little bit of an assist here from, the greatest college football coach of all time, and Nick Saban. The Commanders had a bunch of picks on both days 1 and day 2, day 2 specifically, and that included taking Mikey Sandristil, a slot corner from Michigan, who this past season had 6 interceptions. He's a forced turnover waiting to happen, as well as Johnny Newton, their first pick of the day. Ben Sinnott, H-back, fullback, tight end from Kansas State. But Sandra Still was, according to Nick Saban, perhaps pound for pound the best player in the entire draft. If you have that kind of endorsement from the GOAT of college football, you certainly have my attention. I think this Washington football team may have added 3 or 4 starters from start to finish on day 2.
How about that? Now, we'll have to get used to this. Sandra Still, I think. Sandra Still? Sandra Still, I think is how you pronounce it. We get used to saying these names, and Tungavialoa eventually came. So over time, we will get used to it. But it's got a number of syllables that don't quite match up. But Sandra Still is going to be, they hope, a star for them. And this was the Adam Peters react to finding him still on the board when they got to the pick that they made him at in round 2 of the draft, number 50 overall.
Another captain, and another one where we were pretty nervous there because as it was coming down to him, I mean that's what we had our sights set on. And Mikey is a guy who's impressed myself for a really long time since he was a freshman, seeing him catch passes, and he transitioned to corner and playing nickel, and 6 interceptions last year, and was really the heart and soul of that Michigan team. I think anybody will even tell you. I know JJ had a big part in that too, but I think anybody will tell you Mikey, as much as anybody, was a team leader. And I think what sealed the deal with us is when we went to the pro day, and he was incredible doing the DB drills, and then he was the best one on offense doing the receiver drills. Outstanding route runner, outstanding ball skills, and he could just go all day. And the night before, we had dinner with him, and he was as impressive off the field as he was on the field. So we were thrilled to get him. He'll be a great nickel.
He's not big. He's 5'9", 182 pounds. But when you hear him talked about as both a receiver and as a corner, it's probably too big a leap to get to this because he was bigger and better and in the Hall of Fame. But Champ Bailey had played some wide receiver when he was at Georgia, and they took him number 7 overall in 1999. Extenuating circumstances forced them to trade him for Clinton Portis, which, obviously in retrospect was a mistake. Also, they threw in a second-round pick when they didn't have a lot of respect for draft picks. That was the beginning of Joe Gibbs, too. But, if he's that, offense is the name of the game now. And if he's that good, you might see him, especially if they have some injuries. They may use him from time to time in some third and long situations. I wouldn't be shocked by that. If he becomes a star at corner, I guess he becomes too valuable for that. But, again, it's a guy who made the transition from receiver to corner, and they think that he's going to be a hell of a nickel for them. So we're going to find out. Listening to him talk, very impressive. This is part of the Sandra Still news conference that took place, I guess this would have been on Friday, and he came across extremely well, and obviously very happy to be here.
It was definitely a dream come true, growing up. Dream and wish and pray to be in this position. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I was not expecting it to be the Commanders. I thought I was going to the Steelers at 51. But, I felt my phone vibrating. I looked down, it was a Virginia number. I'm like, man, who the heck from Virginia is calling me right now? I pick up the phone, and, right away, my heart was just, I felt at ease. I felt at peace. My mind was finally at peace. When I met with Coach Quinn here in Michigan, the meeting we had, everything about it was good. The vibes were great. I could just tell in how every coach I was in there was speaking. They had a genuine love and appreciation for myself, and it was definitely reciprocated. I felt that that was a meeting that I felt leaving very, very comfortable, and I appreciated the conversation that the coaches had with me, and I'm just very excited to get to Washington and get the ball rolling.
Why did you expect it to be Pittsburgh at 51?
My agent was just telling me for a while that if I fall to 51, that the Steelers will have a chance of getting me. The GM really liked me at 51, so that's just once we got to pick 48, I was like, all right, I'm probably getting into my my wheelhouse. So I was just, thinking that, all right, it might fall to Pittsburgh. So I'm excited I got the call from, Washington, and, I'm already very comfortable with the whole staff. So I'm super excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, so he didn't go to 51. They got him at 50. And time will tell, time will tell, as they will with all of them. As much excitement as there is in that front office about seeing a player that they had in the first round still available at pick 36 in round 2, Johnny Newton, the tackle from Illinois. Again, we're going to have to see, how that all works out. But right now, sunshine and lollipops. And also you wonder, you got two defensive tackles who are highly paid in Deron Payne and John Allen, both of them making big bucks, and a team that's got lots of weaknesses. That would seem to be a strength. So why take another tackle? This was Peters explaining that.
When you pick a guy like Johnny Newton, we have 2 great players on the inside, and we have 2 other really, really good football players too in that defensive tackle group. And then really behind them we have some good players too. So at first glance you think that's it's a pretty packed room, but I don't think you can. That's what I learned in San Francisco is can't have too many great D linemen, and we'll find a way to get them all on the field. I know DQ, and that's what I said to DQ is like, can we do this? He's like, yeah, we'll find a way to get them all on the field. Talked with Joe Witt, and he was all about it because really Johnny was, not significantly, but certainly clearly higher than anybody else we had on the board there. So everybody was on board, and that was cool. It was a cool process really throughout, and really appreciate everybody's willingness to listen and give their opinions. And I think that's how you have successful drafts.
So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But I agree with the philosophy. I think you see a lot of successful teams do this. They look at a position and say, yeah, we're loaded there, but this is the best player on the board. We'll find a way. We'll get him in. And in worst case scenario, you make a trade. There's a lot of things. It's better to have too much than too little, obviously. Last thing from Peters here is what they did in the third round, at the end of the third round, the 100th pick overall, where they took Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver out of Rice. And yes, he is the son of Ed McCaffrey, who was a Pro Bowl receiver with the Denver Broncos, and the brother of Christian McCaffrey, who is probably going to wind up in the Hall of Fame and has obviously a lot of familiarity with Peters coming from the 49ers organization. So it was the research on this pick. Let's put it this way, was a little bit different for Adam Peters as he looked to make this move.
I did get a little insight from his brother. I got a little encouragement from his brother, but I didn't need it. I can tell you that right now. I didn't need it, and just watching him ascend from really Nebraska and watching him play what he did there, and it's actually really fun just watching it chronologically and how he evolved at every step of the way until really the Senior Bowl, when he was outstanding at the Senior Bowl, being able to get open, and if he wasn't open, he was making contested catches. He's almost 6'2", which is, you're surprised because he moves so well for a guy that's almost 6'2". He moves like a guy who's maybe 5'10" in terms of his quickness. He's got incredible shuttle numbers, and where you're talking about the 3-cone and the 20-yard shuttle, and those numbers really show up on the tape. And he's tough. He's got great hands, and he's got incredible mindset. So, seeing him get better and better throughout the process, it tells us that he's only going to get better.
Now, I don't know anything about Luke McCaffrey other than he's the son of Ed McCaffrey and the brother of Christian McCaffrey. I know that his mother was an outstanding soccer player at Stanford. That's where the parents met. Other than that, I can't tell you. All I can tell you is there are families which have great bloodlines, the Watts, the Mannings. There are other situations where you have a great player and his brother isn't nearly as good. Going back to Terry Bradshaw, believe it or not, had a brother who briefly played quarterback in the NFL. It doesn't always translate. But a couple of things I like about it. One, he's a former quarterback. Number two, he's maybe this isn't a great comp, but it's a comp. Julian Edelman was a quarterback as well. He only played quarterback in college. McCaffrey has made that transition. He's got a dad and a brother who can, kind of help him with the process. I mean, he may not be that good, but, for a pick in the third round, number 100 overall, where they had 5 picks that day, 2 third-rounders and 2 second-rounders, I don't know. I can't poke any holes in it. Going shopping at the McCaffrey store seems like a good idea for me. The only big takeaway from this, and we'll get more into this in the next hour, but the big criticism, some of the reasons that many of the analysts didn't quite go A+ in the draft or A, or some even went B-, is they didn't really address the offensive line that well. So the only offensive lineman who was taken was Brandon Coleman, who's from TCU. He's big. He's 6'5", 313 pounds. Can he play left tackle? He did a little in college. Is he ready for that in the NFL? We don't know. So I think what's going to happen, and I think that there will be some players like this available. Once the draft picks come in and they start to figure out their salary cap, there'll be some cap casualties along the way. And that's how Charles Leno wound up here. Was he great for the 3 years he played? No, but he was serviceable. I think that's probably the direction they're going to go. They did address tight end. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, 6'4", 250, second tight end drafted after Brock Bowers. That will help them, and that's, quasi-offensive line. But, yeah, the line remains a question. Many thought that with all those picks, they would address the line a little bit more than they did with only one significant pick. But things can change, and trades can be made. They have a lot of cap room still left, and if any team is looking to give up a veteran tackle, that might be a possibility. Or even in a cap casualty situation, somebody would come in and play for them for a while. We'll see. Coming up in the next hour, react from Josh Harris on the draft, Dan Quinn, and much more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, the presents under the tree have been unwrapped. Question is, do they work? That's going to be the big thing, and we're not going to find out really for about 3 years, especially on the quarterback. As good as Jayden Daniels may be, and he may be great out of the box like C.J. Stroud, we're really not going to know for a while, And Marcus Mariota was also the number 2 pick of the draft, also the Heisman Trophy winner. And now he's basically the rabbit for Jayden Daniels. He plays until Daniels is ready to play. Could be most of this year, could be a couple of games, could be no games at all. We don't know. But we're through with the draft process, and I always laugh at these draft grades because, it's how did you address needs? Did you get value based on where the players were ranked and so forth? But you just don't know. You don't know, and it's fun. Enjoyed watching the draft. Mel Kiper did his 41st draft, and Matt Miller at the end said this. He worked the day 3 coverage. He's one of the assistants for Mel, or he also analyzes the draft. I don't know how they don't even rank him anymore. It's just like Mel stands alone and these other people work alongside him. And he said this is a guy who needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and he should be, because he has helped to make the NFL a 12-month-a-year sport. This is what we talk about from the end of the Super Bowl until the draft, what's going to happen when we've pretty much known. We've known Caleb Williams since September was going to be the number 1 pick. Well, he was the number 1 pick. Jayden Daniels emerged maybe a little bit later because Drake May was supposedly the guy. Well, May went 3rd overall, so who knows? But it's fun in games. I enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed it, and we move on. Before we get to some react from Josh Harris and Jayden Daniels and Dan Quinn on what happened over the weekend, I was watching some of the Knicks-Sixers game yesterday, and it was in Philadelphia, and sitting courtside was Josh Harris, and it shouldn't be jarring because we knew that he was the owner of the 76ers and the Devils before he bought the Commanders. It's just a look that I'm unfamiliar with. Let's put it that way. Like, yes, Jack Kent Cooke owned the Lakers, and he owned the Kings, and he owned the Forum, and he technically owned the Redskins when Edward Bennett Williams was running them back in the 1970s. But at that time, the NFL had a rule that you weren't allowed to invest in other franchises. If you owned an NFL team, you couldn't own an NBA team, a hockey team, maybe I don't even know if you can own a soccer team, as small a business as that is, relatively speaking, to the NFL. But it was you were supposed to have one ownership. So Cook couldn't technically own the Redskins, so Williams owned it. Then Cook went through the most expensive divorce at that time in the United States. I think it was $150 million. And to pay for that, he sold the Forum, he sold the Kings, he sold the Lakers. He came back, moved to Middleburg, and became the owner of the Redskins. Edward Bennett Williams then took his money and he bought the Baltimore Orioles, owned them for a while. So to see an owner of a team that's, the number one team in this town, dividing it. I don't want to say dividing his loyalties because he doesn't own another NFL team. It's just an odd look to see him in Philadelphia with his team. And based on what he had this year in Washington this past season, he probably felt at home with what was going on in his building, where the majority of the fans seemed to be rooting for the Knicks. And Joel Embiid was really angry about that. He said, I've never seen it. I've been here for 10 years. It kind of pisses me off, especially because Philly is considered a sports town. They've always shown up. I don't think that should happen. It's not okay. And they were, among those rooting for the Knicks was John Starks, who somehow got a floor seat, and he was making a lot of noise. And then Jalen Brunson, who was unbelievable yesterday with 47 points. The fans were shouting MVP just before the buzzer. And Brunson said, not going to lie, this Philadelphia fan base, I've said this before, they're relentless, very passionate. I mean, I'm an Eagles fan. I would know, he said, but seeing the Knicks, hearing the Knicks here is pretty cool. It's awesome. Now, Brunson, as you remember, played at Villanova, was on a championship team at Villanova. So there's a lot of Philadelphia loyalty to him. But also there were a lot of Knicks fans there. And then after the game, they were yelling F. Embiid while stomping on Sixers merchandise. So it was a rough day, I'm sure, after a really good feeling day anyway for Harris after seeing them get the quarterback they wanted, and good haul in day 2 of the draft. He's sitting courtside watching his team lose in his building while the majority of the fan base is rooting for the other team, which is what he had far too many times in the 8 games that the Commanders played here this year. And I was at the Miami game. Man, it was mostly Aqua in there. And Miami, yeah, it's a team that travels, I guess. They were pretty good this year, but that's not something you want, and that's something that then they addressed it. Harris said, he said, we sold out every game, but the majority of it was fans from out of town, and that's on us, and we got to change that. So he understands that. All right, this is Harris, and this was on. Had to be Thursday night, right? Because I don't think he was there on Saturday when they did day 2. So this was Thursday night, and he was talking about the drafting of Jayden Daniels and his reaction to it.
Yeah, look, this is personal for me. I feel like we're on a mission for the city, for the DMV, and everyone's counting on us. And so, yeah, it's big. This is a big deal. So, I mean, obviously, I'm taking it really seriously. I'm devoting a lot of time to it, and thankfully we have an amazing front office coaching staff that's come together. Now I was here for the veteran mini camp, and every single veteran showed up. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. These guys don't have to show up. I mean, you see, all of our players. See Zach Ertz, Pro Bowl tight end. He doesn't have to be here, right? But they all came, and there's something really exciting going on here in D.C. and here in Virginia, and I think that, I'm glad to be a part of it.
It may sound Pollyannish, and he's a businessman. He's in the business to make money. He's made money on other ventures, and he's made money on the Sixers. He's made money on the Devils. They're worth a lot more than he paid for them. He paid $6 billion for this team. Down the road, they're going to be worth more money than that. They make money in the NFL, all that. But I do believe that he and his partners got into this to take a public trust that had been abused for 25 years and make it a bigger part of the community. I'm gonna believe it on that. Is it a charity? No, he's going to make a lot of money. But that seems to be his motivation, and I don't think you discount that. I think that's important. As for whether or not this pick works out, I've seen this before. Dan Snyder didn't speak very often, but when they took a player like RG3, he was sticking out his chest. Okay, we're ready to take down the rest of the league. No, this is exactly how you should look at it. We're optimistic, but we're realistic. This again was Harris on Thursday.
I'm optimistic. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to do everything we can to build a system around him. whether it's blocking, receiving, tight end. Like, we're going to have to build the capabilities around him, support. But, I mean, we're off to a good start.
Yeah, and I love the column that Candace Buckner wrote in the Post on Saturday about this. She was at the news conference that he had on Friday. So they pick him Thursday night, they bring him into town, and he sits down for a news conference in Ashburn on Friday afternoon. And she writes, a day after his new boss described him as a lethal franchise setter capable of snatching the soul of a defense, Daniels reminded an assembly of reporters that he's just a young quarterback who still needs to learn the playbook. Daniels spoke flatly, without frills. Nothing he said will appear on a T-shirt one day, nor seem worthy enough to follow the playbook of Robert Griffin III, who spent his rookie year in Washington trademarking his catchphrases, well, only if you consider I'm not a finished product sexy enough to become the Commander's next marketing slogan. All that stuff that Griffin came in with. And to be fair to him, there was no NIL in those days, so technically he wasn't allowed to make money at Baylor, and he was cashing in. He had a deal with Adidas. He had a deal with Gatorade. He did a lot of that stuff. But yeah, the hashtags. Remember, he put out his wedding registry on Twitter, and so people could buy him gifts. Every time somebody would say nice things about him on Twitter, he would retweet that. And so what she's pointing out is there was a lot of celebrating before the fact, both with RG3 and sadly with Dwayne Haskins. She says after 14 teams passed on Haskins for Washington to land its hometown hero, he told the reporter, to be honest, I'm more motivated now than ever. There's a bigger chip on my shoulder. The league done messed up. Haskins played just 16 games for Washington before his abrupt release in December of 2020. I mean, it would have been ridiculous for Daniels to get up there and say the league done messed up and took Caleb Williams number one. But the attitude was, I got a lot to learn. I'm learning. I'm picking things up along the way. And she says the Daniels era has a better chance of being a success if, at least for the first year, the fan base goes into it with tempered expectations. Unlike Griffin and Haskins, Daniels appears to have more sanity surrounding him as he grows into the role. Even more, Daniels appears to possess an appropriate amount of self-awareness that should help him in his journey. The same goes for his inner circle. So that was good. I mean, she really put that well and really captured, I think, what some of us were feeling like, okay, we've seen too many of these celebrations before the fact, and this is a guy who's coming in with a great degree of humbleness and with all that stuff about, he doesn't want to come here, he didn't like the Top Golf thing, none of that was evident as he spoke to the media on Friday.
This is a dream I had since I was a kid. I set out. I got a blank piece of paper. Where I'll play in the NFL and put it above my door, so I seen it every morning. It's just something I dreamt about every time I worked for. The workouts with my dad. When I didn't want to work out. When I started doubting myself when I was younger. Like, can I really do this, man? All the perseverance I've been through, adversity I've been in my life, led me to this point now.
Pretty cool. Put a piece of paper above the door in his bedroom. I'm going to play in the NFL. And he did go through ups and downs. He played 3 years at Arizona State. He transferred to LSU, and after his first year there, where he had the option of coming back for a fifth year thanks to COVID, or to go to the NFL, as you heard Mel Kiper say, his mother called him and said, what should we do? And Mel said, well, probably fourth round, maybe third round at best. It might be best for you to go back to school, which he did, and made a massive jump from his junior year or his fourth year of eligibility through his fifth, where he won the Heisman Trophy and became the number 2 pick. And here's how he did it.
My swagger and confidence and belief in myself. It's the same kind of confidence I had in high school when I was walking around, playing football, having fun. And, the game felt fun, out there just being able to be with my teammates, my brothers. We worked so hard for 6 months of your life, man. You only get one opportunity on Saturday to go put stuff on film. So, we went out there and we performed.
Yeah, and on that point of what he needs to do, again, he's not coming in saying, I'm ready to step in day one. As Caleb Williams, it's interesting how that played out. they gave away Justin Fields just to get him out of the way. And the Bears drafted a punter in round, I think it was 6 on Saturday. And Caleb Williams put out a tweet, yeah, you're not going to do much punting around here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that attitude. This is more in line, I think, which is the way you should be thinking as a rookie.
I still got more in the tank to learn, and I got more ability to tap into. I'm not a finished product. I'm 23 years old, man. So now I'm able to come in and learn a new system and see where I could take it.
And the role models that he talks about, maybe they're not a surprise, but it's also an older group, a really old group.
Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, like all those type of guys, how they market themselves, how they carry themselves as franchise guys. Hopefully one day be in their shoes. You never see anything off the field issues about them. They carry themselves with a high standard, and I want to be in their shoes one day. So hopefully I could get there, but I got my own dream, my own road to take.
And with Doug Williams standing in the room, I really like this. You knew I'd like this. This was really good. This was Jayden Daniels talking about the pressure that he's facing, because realistically, this organization is looking for its first franchise quarterback in nearly 40 years. Joe Theismann really was the last one. You had RG3 for a year. You had Kirk Cousins for 3 years, though he really wasn't at the elite level. The search for that many years. And he looks across the room and he says this about the pressure that he's facing.
I don't feel no pressure. I'm going to just come in and just be me. But the history, man, that man sitting back over the corner, Doug Williams, first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. Obviously, what he did here. RG3, the assignment that he brought, there's two people I've been knowing for some time, so be able to lean on them and how they had success here and maneuvered throughout this organization, man. I'm open ears for sure. I'm ready to learn.
He's 23-24. You know the history of the league, but realize Doug Williams won that Super Bowl in January of 1988. That's, 36 years, a long time before he was born. So I applaud him for that. One last thing on Daniels, the seal of approval with his new teammate, Mike Sansdrill from Michigan, who I guess he didn't play against Jayden Daniels, but feels this way about him.
Man, we got a baller at the quarterback. He already sent me a DM. He said, let's go. I'm excited. Me and JD actually, we did build a little friendship over the past, couple, I say month and a half, 2 months, just through the draft process and the combine process. So I'm super excited. And I know that's a gunslinger. That's a quarterback that's going to sacrifice his body for his team. He's a winner. He has a chip on his shoulder to prove that he wants to be the best quarterback in this class. So I'm excited. And I can't wait to compete against him in practice and all offseason. And I'll even catch for him. So let's do it.
Yeah, he catch. Now, I mentioned this earlier. He's small. He's only 5'9", but could there be a Champ Bailey element to this? And the other thing about defensive backs, and Adam Peters said this at his news conference over the weekend, that the reason that they become defensive backs is because they can't catch. He started out as a receiver, and according to Peters, the drills they ran, he was as good catching the ball as anybody. Carlos Rogers was a first-round pick here, and he had some great skills, but his career was tubed by the fact he couldn't catch the damn ball. And I always go back to Lovie Smith when he coached the Bears to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, who was a turnover machine. I mean, Rex was always trying to fit it into tight windows and had way too many interceptions. But what Lovie would say was, we tell our quarterbacks, don't necessarily hold back on that. He said the reason that these guys are playing wide receiver is because they can't catch. And you think about, if you ever played football, the first day of JV practice, the fast guys are all going over to see if they can be wide receivers. Some of them stick. The ones that don't, they're moved over to the secondary because they can't catch. That's a big thing. Here's a guy who can catch, and could they possibly use him in some sets as a wide receiver. That makes for an interesting thing. And you got two guys coming in together, so maybe they work on it. Minicamp, it's either this weekend or the next weekend. I'm not sure whether they've set that yet, but it's going to be one of the next 2 weekends. And maybe we'll get a little bit of a look at that. Not a full look because they're not going to be in pads or anything like that. But might be interesting to see him play a little offense as well. Dan Quinn's react on the new quarterback that he has. We'll get to that and more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock. I don't know what your routine is on football Sundays. If you watch these pregame shows, I find myself watching the Fox show most of the time. And, yeah, I mean, it gets ridiculous with the incredible guffawing that goes on, and there isn't really much, substance to it. I don't know, I've been watching it forever, ever since James Brown started hosting it 30 years ago, 1994. JB has moved on to CBS, and CBS continues to trail, and you look at the set, they've added a younger guy in Michael Strahan. They're trying to work Gronk in. He's doesn't do it for me, but he's in there. And they still have Jimmy Johnson, who's there on a semi-regular basis. Like if they have a doubleheader, he flies in from Key West to do the show. Otherwise, he does it from home. Howie Long, who's in his 60s, and Terry Bradshaw, who is still probably the lightning rod of the show. He's pushing 80. He's in his 70s. James Brown is in his 70s. And then they've got Kurt Menefee, who's probably in his 50s. But it's, overall, without Strahan, it's an old show. And CBS, I guess their strategy is to go younger. So they've just announced that they have dumped Phil Simms and Boomer Esiason. Phil is close to 70. Boomer's in his 60s. And both of them have left the show. And this is the new pregame show with the recently retired Matt Ryan, made it official. Didn't play last year, but officially retired. And they've added J.J. Watt, who's also young, just retired. Bill Cowher is staying. Nate Burleson is staying. And James Brown, thank goodness, is still staying. So I don't know what the strategy behind it is other than to basically get younger. Cowher, I think, is my age, about 65. And JB, as I say, is in his 70s. But that's your new pregame show. Maybe I'll watch it a little more often when the Commanders are playing their game on CBS. Most of the time they're on Fox. But I don't know if this is going to really shake things up. I don't find Matt Ryan or J.J. Watt to be wildly entertaining. Burleson's solid. Bill Cowher's solid. It does not have the guffaw factor that the Fox show has, where everybody goes, bah! We don't have any of that. It's so, Simms and Boomer out, two older quarterbacks, kicked to the curb for the young quarterback, Matt Ryan. And then you add a defensive guy in J.J. Watt and the coach and Bill Cowher and Burleson. Burleson probably, hopefully it's going to be JB's choice, not CBS's choice. But if at one point JB decides he's going to leave, Burleson I could see hosting that show. I think he's being groomed for that, and that may happen down the line. If you're into those things, I find myself watching it. Let's get some react from Dan Quinn on the quarterback, and he talked on I guess it must have been Thursday after they made the pick, and what's he going to say? He's going to be obviously thrilled about that. You could say Tom Lavero is too negative. He's not. He's my friend. I think he does a great job when he writes columns in the Post, and he's saying, yeah, get excited. It's a hell of a lot better than it was during the Dan Snyder years. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but you have to pump your brakes just a little bit. And he writes, Daniels will create the optimistic buzz this franchise needs in the first full season with the new owner's fingerprints on everything. Peters sounds convinced, but he has to be. This is why Harris and his consultant show hired him. Yeah, they did have a lot of guys making that decision, including somebody from the NBA. But okay, they settled on Adam Peters, and so far everything looks to be good. And then he chose Dan Quinn. Lavero writes, it's okay to be excited and optimistic, but no one is paying any of us to be convinced, so don't be. There were 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round Thursday night. odds are only 2 of them will actually be considered worthy of the choice. You don't have to go far for the evidence of those odds, or even worse. Peters was likely excited, optimistic, and convinced when his 49ers took Trey Lance with the 3rd pick in the 2021 draft. To be fair to Peters, he was an assistant there. That was a John Lynch move, so he may have had input, but it was not his alone. So that's a little bit different than this. They were so convinced in San Francisco, they traded 3 first-round picks for the chance to draft Lance. They wound up trading him to Dallas 2 years later for a 4th-round selection, one of 4 of the class of 5 first-round picks who are no longer with the team, and was excited, optimistic, and convinced of all of them. Just look inside the Commanders building for more validation on that. And you point to Marcus Mariota. Everyone fawned over Mariota, the 2nd pick by the Tennessee Titans in 2015 out of Oregon. Like Daniels, he was the Heisman Trophy winner, as well as the winner of the Maxwell Award, the Walter Camp Award, the Manning Award, the Davey O'Brien Award, and the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. He threw for 4,400 yards and 45 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions. Here's what his teammate, receiver Harry Douglas, said about Mariota going after training camp. When we first came here, you understood why he's had so much success. It starts with his demeanor, how humble he is, how his future is so bright. Some people, God is just blessed like that, and he's one of those people. See, Mariota was blessed too, Tom writes. Now he'll be carrying a clipboard for the Commander's sideline for his 5th team in 9 years. So it's possible he'll be playing, and we'll get to what Daniel said about that, because I don't know if this Michael Penix thing is indicative of the way the league is going, that rather than throw these guys out there, they want to let them learn for a while, as we've seen the succession of quarterbacks in Green Bay as Aaron Rodgers replaces Brett Favre and Jordan Love replaces Aaron Rodgers, and so far so good on Love. He may not turn out to be as good as the other 2, but he's their starting quarterback. They didn't make any moves to make any changes on that. So it could be that even though they took Jayden Daniels number 2, doesn't mean he's the opening day starter. I think that's very much in play, and we'll see how long it goes. I mean, I don't think they're going to put him out there unless they think he's ready to play. So this was Quinn on Thursday, and asked what and when was he sold on Daniels.
Anybody who had watched football could say this is a talented guy. So I'd say over the last 2 months when I found out what was behind the ribcage, and this guy is tough, he is competitive. So I'd say the things that stuck out to me going to LSU and hearing about early meetings with people and all the extras that he wanted to do to become great, because when you're already playing at a really good level, to go to the next spot is not easy. And so I know how hard he worked for that, and I think probably he spoke about the Florida game, but more importantly, that showed a lot of resilience. He had gotten banged up in the game prior to that. And so not to have a full week of practice and to kind of go out and put on that type of performance, I think those are the 2 things that jumped out to me, the dedication and the resilience. And I think all of us would know at every position that's really important, but at quarterback, probably as much as anything, because the tough times, the adversity is going to be there, and we'll be there standing shoulder to shoulder with him and give him all the support he needs. But this is a guy that is a rare competitor.
Now, is your expectation that he'll be the week 1 starter?
You know what? The expectations for us is like putting out the most competitive team that we can. And when that time comes, when he's ready, then that's when we'll do it. But there's no timeline on that. We're fortunate here that we've got a good, strong quarterback room. But, we'll let that all the way play out. The central theme and everything that we're doing here is competing. It's at quarterback, it's at offensive tackle, it's at defensive end, it's wherever you look. And so that'll be the central theme of how we'll do it.
And what is the challenge of integrating a rookie like Jayden into the NFL? How do you push him? How do you push those buttons?
Well, I think there's, if there was an ideal space to come into, it's one where everything is on the same page. So he's not coming into a team that this is the system we've been running for the last 5 or 6 years, and everybody can be so far ahead with that. So knowing that the veterans are only a few weeks ahead into that process, we'll all be on the same page moving forward together. Some of the hardest parts about coaching in the NFL in the early phases is a veteran who's played 5 or 6 years has this knowledge, and a rookie's coming into here. So imagine teaching English 101 and master's English in the same day. And so you can't teach the same class in the same way. So for a player coming in right now, you mind sliding over just a little bit? Thank you. For a player coming in right now, I think that's a big deal to everybody, being on the same field. And for, hardworking guys like he and Marcus, they'll put the work in.
Okay, so there you go. And I think that's key. And also the point he makes about a new system. Cliff Kingsbury, he was asked about quarterback, and he said he would adapt his system to whoever they took. He's had running quarterbacks before, obviously, so he's going to have that. But I don't think the rush is there, and I think this is a unique situation. I don't think the fan base is going to be up in arms. Now, Mariota may not be that great, and if he's terrible, maybe there'll be more of a rush to put him on the field. But this is a total new system and a total field that's probably different than a lot of places in the league, because this has been such a mess for 25 years that anything that looks professional is going to be an upgrade. So, you hear people say, "Oh, the pressure," and he's got the shoulder, he's got everything on his shoulders, and he's got to. I don't know if it's going to be this year. I think we make a judgment on Jayden Daniels in 3 years. If at the end of 3 years there hasn't been much progress, doesn't look like he's an NFL quarterback, then you made a big mistake and you got to move on. But the rush to find out in day one, and there usually is when you take a quarterback this high, and the Bears have done this with Caleb Williams because Fields is gone. They could have had both of them together. They didn't do that. So you got a situation here, and Mariota understands how the deal works as he's gone from team to team. He's on his 5th team in 9 years. But it is not going to be, I don't think, it's going to be a rush to get him on the field. This is more from Quinn, and it's about getting a guy who's a man. And again, they did this. Every player they took had at least 4 years of college experience, and most of them were team captains. And that was a factor in taking Daniels, who spent 5 years of playing college football.
Every step along the way, it's a great dude. It's a great dude. Like, there was no other answer that came out of people. And so it was very cool to see it come to life. I think you guys got a taste of that. This is a mature guy. He's had a lot of starts. He's been through the fires. And there's some that you can gain from that. Like, you've been in the fights. You've got some lessons that you were taught. And the best of the best learn from them. And you can see there's very few people that put together as good a year as he had last year after already playing in an excellent league and then taking it up again. So I think that alone speaks to it. The best of the best, they don't ever stop. They just keep finding ways and ways to improve, and he has that trait.
Yeah, the big step up. And this is, again, Quinn on recognizing the talent that he had, and then after looking at the talent, really realizing the kind of person that he had.
It didn't take long, like I said, on the field to see it. So finding out, like I said, what was underneath the helmet and behind the rib cage and what he stands for as a man, like when those two things are in conjunction, like you have your off-field world in order and you have your on-field world in order, some really cool things can happen, and I think that's the merging that he's at.
And Dan, this fan base is juiced up. They're excited to have Jayden
juiced up too
as part of this franchise, and with that comes a little bit of a pressure of, like, they think he's going to be a big part of the solution to help turn around this franchise. As his head coach, how do you kind of help him navigate that and not allow that kind of pressure or feel that pressure of doing everything at once?
Yeah, I think for him and for all his teammates, knowing that, like, I got their back, and we're going to work our asses off to put everybody in the spots, in the right spots, to make sure they can do their thing at a really high level. But we just want to grab as many competitors like him as we can and put them all together and let that fire burn, because we're going to be an exciting team, for all of our fans and our family to watch. Say, man, these guys really bring it, and we're going to attack every part of the field, horizontally, vertically, and with the quarterback's leg. So when you got to defend it all, it's hard, and we're going to make it hard.
You'd run through a wall for a guy like that, right? I mean, that sounds good. Sounds good, and I hope it works out. I really do. But I got to buy into what Tom writes at the end of his column. Tom Libero, he says, "Be excited, be optimistic, but don't be convinced just yet. You've suffered a lot of pain following this football team. Have something to show for it. Perspective." And that's true. We've been fooled before. Lucia's pulled the football out from under us many, many times. The only thing I can say that would say that this is different is it's a different way of doing business. It's not Vinny Serrato running the draft. Remember when Vinny ran the draft one year, and they made sure that every player made the team that he picked, and a couple of them, including the kicker, wasn't an NFL kicker. And it was just, complete nonsense the way. I think there was a Zorn year where he wasn't going to put up any fight. You took Dwayne Haskins when the coaching staff didn't want him. It's just a level of professionalism that made all of this happen. It may not work out. We may look back and say he's a bust. But the fact that you had a true general manager, you had an assistant general manager. Ever know we had in Washington, you ever had an assistant general? The last time that happened, I think, was when Charlie Casserly assisted Bobby Beathard. Well, no, since then, nothing like that. And for many years, Dan Snyder was the GM. So I like that. You got a coach who seems to be well-liked, did take a team to a Super Bowl, was beloved in Dallas, it appeared, as a defensive coordinator. So you got that going for you. The fact that they loaded up in the middle rounds of the draft, you got to like that. 5 picks. If you miss on a couple of them, okay. But you had 2 second-rounders and 3 third-rounders. But that's good stuff. And the players that they picked look good right now. How good they're going to look a couple of years from now, we don't know. But there just seems to be a level of sanity that we just haven't seen in a long time here. And I would feel pretty good about that. All right. Are we through with the draft? Maybe. A little more follow-up, I think, for tomorrow, which we will get to. Tony may have some draft thoughts as well, and that is coming up next. We will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.